Hey, I'm Shane Smith, the owner of Genesis Offroad. This is our installation video for our Gen 3 dual battery system for the gas engine JL and Gladiator. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through step by step how to install our dual battery system. We're going to talk about the battery options that are available that fit this kit. I'm going to show you everything that you need to get it installed. And then at the end, I'll give you several tips on how to get the most out of your system, so stick around for that at the end. So with this kit, you're going to get a new steel battery tray that's going to replace the stock plastic battery tray. It's a direct drop-in replacement for it. You're going to get our new Gen 3 power hub, the top plate here that sits on top of the batteries to hold the batteries down. We call the power hub. This is the brains of the operation, and we'll go over how all of this works for you in detail. And then also, we also have an optional feature that we recommend for the JL and the Gladiator. This is our optional engine on sensor. So this tells the power hub that your engine is running, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail too. And then as for hardware, the only hardware that you need to install this is 4 bolts to hold the power hub down to the tray. And that's all the hardware you're gonna need. You'll reuse some of the factory hardware. Okay, let's talk about battery options for this kit for a minute. With our JL and Gladiator kits, you're gonna need a couple of matching Group 25 size batteries. Now the Group 25 refers to the physical, industry standard physical size of the batteries. So let me show you a couple of options. We offer the Odyssey Group 25. This is the Odyssey Performance Series. And we also have this one from Full Throttle. This is the Full Throttle FT750 25. So both of these are fantastic options that we offer through our website. You can order these, have them dropped off at your door. Both are excellent, high quality, deep cycle AGM batteries. Can't go wrong with either one of them. The Full Throttle one, we're gonna be installing the Full Throttle brand in our JL today. The reason I chose this one is it has a little bit more capacity. That means you're gonna be able to run your accessories for as long as possible. Now, another option that some of our customers like to use is the Optima batteries. The Optima has a Group 25 in their red top, but just be aware that the red top Group 25 battery, it's a little bit smaller than the industry standard, and therefore it has less capacity. Also, the red top is a cranking battery only, so you don't want to use it for deep cycle, draining it down and then recharging it. You don't want to use that. Optima also has their yellow top. That one is called a 75/25. It looks a little bit different. It's also a little bit smaller. It has less capacity. And for that reason, we actually don't recommend it. You can use it if you want to. We got lots of customers that run that one. But because of its smaller capacity, we feel like you're gonna be better suited. You're gonna be happier with a higher capacity battery. So now we're under the hood of the JL. It's the same. It looks exactly the same if you have a gas engine Gladiator. So what we're gonna be doing today is pulling the stock battery tray out of here. And it looks like there's a lot going on, but it's actually very simple. I'm gonna walk you through it step by step. So we're gonna start on one end and we're gonna remove the fuse box, the battery, and the air box. That's gonna open up all this space so we can get that stock tray out. So we're gonna get started by disconnecting our battery and pulling the battery out. Okay, let's start with loosening the negative post clamp with a 10mm socket. We'll set that clamp aside. Then we'll loosen the positive clamp right here with a 10mm. And we'll just put this clamp back here out of the way. Pull this sleeve off of here. Okay, we'll use an extension with a 10mm to pull the battery bracket out right down here. And then we'll lift the battery out. Now, most of you know the JL has 2 batteries. There's a second smaller battery down below your fuse box. So just be careful with your factory post clamps because those are still hot because they're connected to that other battery down there. Okay, let's go ahead and get this air box out of the way. We're gonna pop this cover loose with an 8mm socket and pull the top cover off. And there's also a hose clamp right here. We're gonna loosen that so it's easier to get this cover off. Okay, we'll pull this cover off of here. And the 10mm bolt on the fender. Now this air box is just gonna wiggle out, so we'll just pry it out of here. Now we'll move the power steering fluid bottle out of the way by removing this single 10mm bolt. And we're just gonna set this over here out of the way. Okay, now let me show you how to remove the fuse box. Take this cover off, then we're gonna take a 7mm socket. There's 4 7mm bolts in here. Now you may know on the older Jeep JKs, there was only one wire that fed power into the whole fuse box. On the newer Jeeps, the JL and the Gladiator, now there's 6 or 7 or 8 different wires that come into the fuse box depending on what options you have on your vehicle. So you may see a different number of wires connected to the fuse box here, and that's normal. But those stampings are very small, and then my eyes are too old to see those. So I'm going to use a little Sharpie and label each one of these at the position that they go from 1 through 7. Now we'll remove each one of these wires coming in the fuse box with a 10mm. Okay, now to get this fuse box out of here, we're going to use a small pry tool. There's 4 little clips that clip the top of the fuse box down to the lower base. So I find it easiest to start with the back corner over here, pry that out and lift a little bit, and then pry the front ones up, like that. And the fuse box will lift up. And then on the bottom of the fuse box, there's 4 large connectors that have all the wires that go into the fuse box. So you'll just grab each one of these and kind of wiggle those loose, and those should pop off. So the fuse box base is held in place by 2 10mm nuts here and here, and also 1 Phillips head screw closer to the firewall. Okay, now the fuse box base can come out. We'll just move these wires out of our way and get this piece out of here. So the next thing we're going to do is pop this cover off to give us access to the small accessory battery that's down below here. And we're just going to kind of groom all these cables out of our way so that we can get this big plastic battery tray out of here. Okay, I'm going to use some zip ties to kind of hold all these large connectors up out of our way. Okay, now we need to start popping some of these little wire retaining clips out of here. We're using a little panel removal tool. I've just got a little pry tool. So we'll pop those out of there. Okay, now this wire bundle here, they use this little plastic channel to help protect this wire while it's going across here. We really don't need this piece, so I'm going to use a small screwdriver and pop this little plastic case open and remove that. There we go. So we won't need this. Now let's pop the little plastic clips that's holding the post clamps along the top rail of the battery tray. And we'll set these clamps out of our way. Okay, now we need to move these ground wires that's over here inside the fender. Your Jeep, your vehicle may have a different number of wires here on the fender based on your options and based on your year model. So if yours doesn't look exactly like mine, that's okay. So I've got one that goes over here to the negative post clamp. That's to ground the body to the battery. And then I've got another one that comes over and goes into the positive harness, goes down below the engine, and I believe that one goes to the engine block ground. And then this one that runs along the inside of the fender here, this one goes down and grounds to the frame. So we're gonna remove these 2 right here with a 10mm and a 13mm. I'm gonna put this nut back in place so I don't lose it. Now, I know we've got a lot of wires kind of spread out around here, so what I like to do is use a label maker and label the wires where they go. So you can see on here, I've already got a couple of white labels. If you don't have a label maker, just use a piece of tape and a Sharpie. That's gonna help you out later because I know you got a lot of wires in here. So we're just gonna take these 2 ground wires and move them out of our way. Okay, now we're gonna pop the cover off of the small accessory battery using our 10mm socket again. There's 4 bolts holding this cover down. Now we can pull this cover out of here. Okay, so now you can see the small auxiliary start-stop battery. This battery is used for the engine start-stop system. When you pull up to the red light and you stop, the engine shuts down. All of the electronics, the radio and the fans and everything, run off of the small battery. And then when you lift your foot off the brake and the engine starts, it cranks off the large battery. So we're gonna replace this small battery with a second full-size battery in our kit. So we're gonna pull this out and it will not be reused. Now, not all JLs have this small auxiliary start-stop battery under here. It changed whether you have that or not based on some of the engine options, the e-torque system, and what year model you had it. Some years it was available, some years it wasn't. But if you don't have it in here, just skip this part of the video. Okay, let's pull this cover back and we'll pull the ground off of here with a 10mm. Okay, there's our ground. And there's our positive harness. So we'll set this positive aside for the moment. Later, we're going to connect this to the factory positive clamp on the big battery up top. Okay, so let's talk about the negative post on the small battery now. Now, originally on the earlier model JLs, this was a straight pass-through wire. It went from the negative of the small battery straight up to the negative of the large battery. That's this wire right here. Now, on the newer model JLs in around 2021, Jeep changed that. So now instead of going straight from one battery to the other, the ground on the big battery actually goes to the body. So we don't want to leave this one disconnected. This end that came off of the small battery can be taped up and just tucked up under the fuse box in a minute out of the way. So we're not going to reuse this end of the wire, but we're going to leave it, just leave that wire connected on this end. Now we can pull the small battery out. Now we're ready to pull the bolts that hold the tray down in here with a 10mm socket. We'll start at the firewall. There's 4 on the firewall. And then there's several down in the battery tray. There's a couple more on the tray inside the fender. And then the last 2 on this little bracket up top on the fender. Okay, now we're ready to pull this big bulky plastic tray out of here, but I'm gonna kind of groom these wires back out of our way a little bit to make this a little bit easier. I'll just set all this over here out of our way as much as possible. And now we should be able to lift this tray up and out of here. Okay, now with that big ugly thing out of the way, now we can get our new tray down in here. So take our new tray, this side's gonna go against the firewall. We'll just slide this right in here onto those studs on the firewall right back here. The front of the tray is gonna go in front of this tab and we'll bolt it down. All right, we're gonna reuse our factory hardware that came off the firewall to hold that tray in place. We'll get that started right here. Then let's go ahead and start our other hardware at the front. We'll go ahead and tighten everything down. Okay, now the tray is in here. Next thing, we're gonna start working on putting the fuse box back in. To do that, we need to get one little piece of hardware off of the plastic cover piece, but we're gonna remove this little clip off this plastic piece here. Just pinch that on the back side, and this little piece is gonna pop out. Then we're gonna take this piece and we're gonna pop it into the little rectangle hole on our battery tray. Okay, now we're gonna grab our fuse box base and we're gonna put this back in. You notice there's a couple of holes here, and this is where the Phillips goes. So we're gonna put this right on top of that hardware on our tray. Slide this in place like that. Okay, now let's reuse our factory hardware to hold that base down to our tray. And the screw goes closest to the firewall. All right, now we're going to snap these large connectors back down into the fuse box base. Let's get our zip tie out of the way. The one on the fender is going to go lay across this way. And these connectors are going to snap into that base, like that. This one goes closest to the engine. Okay, now we're ready to set the fuse box back in here. Lay it right on top. And these will just snap in place. So now let's start grooming these cables that go into the fuse box back into place. We've got a bunch of cables moved over here out of our way. So we're going to pull all this stuff back out so we can get to it. We'll start grooming these cables where they go. Let's bring our ground wires back over here. Get these back in place. Here's our ground from the small battery. We're just going to tuck that down here, down low underneath our fuse box. That can just go right down there. Okay, here's my number 1. Number 2 goes to the positive post clamp. 3. Okay, so on my JL, I don't have anything on position number 4, but then wires 5 and 6 were laid across the fender over here, so we'll bring those back over and groom those in place. And then I got a 7 hiding down here somewhere. Here's number 7. It kind of fell down a little bit. We'll bring that back up top. And there we go. All right, then we'll run these down with a 10 millimeter. Okay, now we're going to tighten up these 4 7 millimeter bolts inside the fuse box. And then let's get these grounds reconnected over here on the fender. So we'll tighten these down with a 10 millimeter and a 13 millimeter. Now let's make sure all of our wires are just tucked in here against the fuse box, nice and close, so that when we set our battery down in here, we don't pinch any of these wires. All right, now we can pop our cover back on. And we're ready for batteries. Okay, let's grab our cranking battery first. Slide it up this way. Then we're going to turn our accessory battery the opposite direction and set it down in there. Okay, we're going to take our air box and set it down in here. Slide this down in here. I'm going to secure the air box in here with our 10 millimeter bolt on the fender. Okay, now let's take the air box cover and put that back on here. And we'll secure that with the 8 millimeter again. Okay, now let's secure our power steering fluid bottle onto the little tab on the side of our tray using the factory 10 millimeter bolt. Okay, now we're ready to grab the power hub, the top lid, and set it on top of the batteries. All right, we'll set this down on top of the batteries. Right there. And we'll take our hardware baggie and grab the 4 bolts out and secure that down before we start hooking up any wires. Okay, let's start by hooking up our factory positive post clamp over here. Bring this clamp up. And we want to make sure these post clamps are seated all the way down to the bottom of your battery posts so you get a good connection. So I'm going to tap this clamp down and then we'll tighten that up with a 10 millimeter. Okay, now we're going to take the factory positive wire that was on the small battery down below. We're going to bring that up top here and connect it to our positive clamp up top. We're going to remove this nut right here with a 10 millimeter. Now just take a second and groom this wire. pull this up into position. This little cover here is just kind of in our way, so I'm going to pull this off. So I'm going to lay this clamp right up on top here. It's going to look like it's upside down, but that's the best way for that to lay on there. And then put our nut back in place. And then we're going to remove this nut on the other side of the clamp and attach our wire to there. And then we'll tighten that back down. Then if you want to pull your factory cover back up, it should lay right on top of there. Okay, let's get our other positive clamp onto the accessory battery now. We want to tap this down until it's fully seated to the bottom. And we'll use a 13mm or a 1/2" wrench to tighten this one up. Now we'll work on our negative clamps. We're going to bring it up here, kind of groom it around our oil dipstick a little bit. Depending on your model, you may notice that this wire may not be quite long enough to reach over here. That's okay. We're going to loosen up this nut on the bottom of the clamp and rotate it to give us a little bit more length. So I'm going to loosen the 10mm on the bottom of this clamp. So we're just going to loosen that up a little bit, and you should be able to rotate out like this so that it's straighter, and now we can reach over to the post. So then we'll tighten that back down. Okay, now that that's nice and tight, we can get our ground clamp onto the battery post. Again, we want this clamp all the way to the bottom. And we can lift the lid over our bus bars here to access that. And we'll tighten that clamp down. Now we're going to remove this nut here off the factory clamp with a 13mm. So again, like we mentioned earlier, if you have an earlier JL, you can remove this wire that goes down to the factory small battery. But if you have one of the newer models, if you leave that wire off, when you try to start the engine, you're not going to get any power, because on the newer models, 21 and up, this wire actually grounds to the body and not down to the little battery. So probably best just to leave it in place. So in order to get our cable on top of that one, I'm going to take this cable and just flip it upside down, and then ours will lay on top of it a little bit easier. So flip that over, put that back on. Now I can take our new cable and put it right on top of it. Put the nut back on, and we'll tighten that back down. And the last one is the negative clamp for the cranking battery. So we're going to tap this one down all the way to the bottom of the post, and we'll tighten that up with our 1/2" or 13mm. Okay, so if we're sure all the post clamps are nice and tight, that's really it. That's all there is to it. So now that the install is done, let's talk for just a second about our optional engine on sensor cable. So this is an option. We recommend this for the JL and the Gladiator. This is going to tell our system when the engine is running. That means it's going to change the thresholds where it connects and disconnects your batteries. Now that's important on the JLs because of the smart alternator. If it sees your cranking battery and your accessory battery are fully charged, it's going to turn down its output to try to save you a couple drops of gas. That's part of all the EPA fuel efficiency stuff. So one problem that we've seen from that is once it drops its voltage down and the battery combiner separates the batteries, even though you're still driving, now suddenly your accessory battery is not getting a charge. So that means you might have your fridge running in the back or some other accessories that are running off of your accessory battery, then it's not going to be charging your accessory battery even while you're driving. So to deal with that, we've got this little cable here. So to use this is a fuse tap that we're going to tap into an ignition hot circuit inside of the fuse box. Then we're going to route the cable over and we're going to plug that into a mating little bullet connector under here. So let me show you where that's at. We're going to lift up our cover over the bus bars. If you look inside of here, you should be able to see a little green wire. And pull this out. This is a bullet connector. So we're just going to plug this in, make those two together. But we're going to route this under our battery cables over here to our fuse box. Okay, let's take the fuse box cover off. And we're looking for a fuse inside of here that is ignition hot only. That means it's only turned on when the vehicle is running. So under your cover here, there's a little legend that shows all these fuses. The one I picked, the one I like to use here is for the seat heaters. So that's gonna be fuse number F58, which is right here in the middle. So I'm gonna grab, inside your fuse box is a little fuse removal tool. So I'm gonna pull this little tool out, and I'm gonna pull this fuse that I've identified as the seat heaters. And then I'm gonna attach this fuse to this extra spot in our fuse holder. So this fuse will still be for the seat heaters, and then this fuse will control our engine on sensor. So that's just a little fuse tap. So we're gonna route this down here, plug that back in the same spot where it came from. And then we'll just kind of groom this wire to kind of run through the fuse box and out the side. Now, if you try to pop the fuse box cover back on there, it's probably not gonna click down all the way. So if you would like to, you can take a little razor blade and cut a little notch on your fuse box cover, just so you're not pinching that cable. But I'm just gonna set my cover down here for the moment. Then we'll come back over here and just kind of get this slack and tuck that back up in here, out of the way. And that's all there is. Don't forget your little removal tool. Now, if you have our optional monitoring system, the G-screen, let me show you where that plugs in to the power hub. You're gonna take the G-screen cable and pop the dust cover off right back here. And the cable is notched, so you're gonna line up the notch with the port, plug that in. That will go in there, and you got a twist lock collar that will slide on, and then twist it 90 degrees, and it clicks in place. Now, when you get ready to hook up your accessories, you're gonna lift the little cover here over the bus bars. You're gonna notice that we've got several points here for you to hook up your heavy duty cables. So if you've got a winch, you've got stereo amplifiers, you've got air compressors, you got a auxiliary fuse box like an S-Pod, whatever those things are, you can attach those heavy gauge cables to the center studs here, the big studs. These are 3 different sizes to give you some flexibility with your aftermarket cables. Just go to whichever stud fits your cable. We also have several little screw terminals here. These are going to be for your smaller gauge wires. These use a number 10 ring terminal for, that would be like something like some LED lights on the front bumper that just need to go straight to the battery. You can use those little screw terminals there for those small wires. And once you get all that groomed in there nice and neat, take your time, do it right, get your cables looking good, and then the cover will just kind of keep that protected from if you're working under here with your wrench or your ratchet, so you don't accidentally bump those bus bars. Okay, so if you want some more information about how all of this works, we've got another video that's gonna go over every bit of this in a lot more detail. If you guys have questions about any of this stuff, check out the Contact Us page on our website. Also, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm going to be posting a bunch of helpful tech tip videos to help you get the most out of your Genesis products. So thanks for watching.